Hello guys, in the last chapter what we covered is we covered the time response of a control system. There we saw how does the response of a control system varies with time, and we extracted certain parameters like rise time, fall time, peak time. Such sort of parameters we extracted from the time response. Okay, but in this chapter what we are going to do is we will be dealing with one of the most important design parameters in control system, that is stability. So basically what stability means is, suppose if there is a small change in input or certain system parameter varies. System parameter, as I told you earlier in sensitivity also, it is like magnetic field in a motor, it is like engine quality due to aging. If such parameters are varying, so what is the change in output will be termed as stability. So small change in input or parameter should lead to small change in output, not a large change. Okay, that means small disturbance should lead to small change in output. Okay, small disturbance should only lead to small change in output, that will be termed as stability. Okay, so almost all the control system should always be stable, otherwise what will happen, suppose take an example of an air conditioner. If it is not stable, then what will happen, suppose you have set the temperature at 20 degrees centigrade. If it is not stable, it will keep on cooling will keep on increasing, and temperature may go up to 10 degrees centigrade also, which is undesirable. That is, the response of the system will not be controlled. Okay, response can reach any value, low or high, it will not be controlled. That will be case in a unstable control system. So we always desire that our control system should be stable. So what are the conditions by which we can say a system is stable? So basically a LTI system, linear time invariant system, has two conditions to satisfy for it to be stable. First condition is when bounded input is applied. What is a bounded input? Which is finite at all times. It leads to a bounded output. That you might have studied in signal system also, that bounded input leads to a bounded output. That is BIBO stability. Okay, these are the conditions for an LTI system, because we are dealing with transfer functions, and transfer functions are only valid for LTI system. Next is without input, output must decay to 0. Okay, whenever we remove the input, output must decay to 0. So these are the two conditions which an LTI system must satisfy in order for it to be stable. Okay, we always apply bounded input. Bounded input means that xt is less than some maximum value which is finite for all t. Okay, that is termed as a bounded signal. So examples of bounded signal like unit step signal, sinusoidal signals. Such signals which have a certain maximum value beyond which they cannot go are termed as bounded signal. So we always apply bounded input to get the bounded output. Otherwise, even if it is a stable control system and you apply unbounded input, there is no guarantee that you will get a bounded output. Okay, so unbounded input may result in unbounded output even though the system may be stable. So that is why we need to apply bounded input to get bounded output. Some of the unbounded inputs are like ramp signal, parabolic signal. Such signals are unbounded. Okay, so let us see how we can satisfy the criteria for BIBO stability. Now I know response of a system is equal to input into transfer function. In time domain, this condition will be translated to convolution 0 to infinity g tau r t minus tau d tau. Okay, now I am saying g tau is basically here Laplace inverse of gs. Okay, that is it is impulse response. This is impulse response of the system. Now what I was saying is bounded input, it implies mod RT is less than maximum value M. So if I substitute here, Ct is less than or equal to 0 to infinity g tau m d tau. Okay, so mod Ct is less than or equal to mod of 0 to infinity g tau m d tau. Now mod of 0 to infinity xt dt is always less than or equal to 0 to infinity mod of xt dt. That is, absolute value of integral is less than integral of absolute value. So mod Ct is less than or equal to 0 to infinity mod g tau m d tau. Now the output must always be also be bounded, so it should be less than or equal to some maximum value m2, which implies integral 0 to infinity mod g tau d tau should be finite. Okay, this should be finite. If this goes to infinity, the entire integral will go to infinity. So it is called as gt is absolutely integrable. Okay, that means the integration of absolute value of gt is finite. Gt is absolutely integrable. In discrete domain, it is changed to gn is absolutely summable. Okay, so this is the condition for Bibo stability, that bounded input must produce bounded output, due to which the impulse response must be absolutely integrable. Next, if we come to define the stability in Laplace domain. So basically I am saying 0 to infinity mod g tau d tau should be finite. Now ROC of a Laplace transform is 0 to infinity mod g tau e raised power minus sigma tau d tau. It should be finite. So if we compare these two equations, we get sigma is equal to 0 lies in ROC. Basically here ROC defines that if this integration is finite, for all values of sigma for which this integration is finite, that sigma will lie inside ROC. Okay, again I am telling, ROC is basically the range of sigmas for which this integration is finite. Now I know this integration is finite for sigma is equal to 0. That means sigma is equal to 0 will lie in ROC. That is the condition for stability. Okay, now for a causal signal, causal and stable system, this condition is changed to all poles must lie in left half plane. Okay, that is, poles must have a real part less than 0. So all poles must lie in left half plane. That is the condition for stability in Laplace domain. That absolutely integrable condition is in time domain. So this is in S domain. Next, let us see what will happen if we change the location of poles. What will happen to the response? So first let us consider there is a pole lying in left half plane. So the transfer function would be something like this, 1 upon s plus a. So the impulse response of this system would be e raised power minus at ut. Okay, e raised power minus at ut. Now this is absolutely integrable, so the system is absolutely stable. Okay, if the impulse response is absolutely integrable, system is absolutely stable. Okay, this integration would be finite. Next, if we see, now if we take two poles at this point, that is 1 upon s plus a square. Now I know the Laplace transform of txt is d by ds of xs. So impulse response would be something like this. It would be t into e raised power minus at ut, because Laplace transform of txt is d by ds of xs, and it is the derivative of 1 upon s plus a. Again it is absolutely integrable, so system is absolutely stable. Okay, so this way we can identify that whenever the poles lie in the left half plane, the system would be absolutely stable. Okay, next let us see the case when there are complex conjugate poles in left half plane, like this. This will be minus a, jb, minus jb. So this is an example of an underdamped system. So the response would be something like this. Since oscillations are of decreasing amplitude, its equation is simply e raised power minus at sin bt. Oscillations are decreasing amplitude, it can be integrated, so it is also absolutely stable. Okay, AS here means absolutely stable. Now let us keep one pole at origin. So now it is very clear to me that whenever the poles will lie in left half plane, whether it is complex conjugate poles or real poles, system will always be absolutely stable. Now if it is here, that is 1 upon s, if one pole is lying at origin, okay, then my impulse response would be this constant. Okay, this is called as marginally stable. Okay, so let us first understand what marginal stability means. Basically, whenever the poles will lie on imaginary axis, that two simple poles means pole of order 1, simple poles on imaginary axis, system is termed as marginal stable. The reason is, we say the system is unstable if the poles lie in right half plane. Okay, unstable if poles lie in right half plane, and stable if poles lie in left half plane. So basically when poles are lying on the imaginary axis, it is in the boundary of stable and unstable. It will be termed as marginally stable. Other reason is, suppose we were taking 1 by s as the transfer function. Suppose I take input also as 1 by s. So output would be 1 by s square. So Ct will be t ut, which is unbounded. Okay, RT was ut, which was bounded. Ct is unbounded. So bounded input is producing unbounded output, that is unstable. Okay, now let us take another input. Instead of 1 by s, RT is equal to e raised power minus at ut, that is Rs is equal to 1 by s plus a. So Cs would be 1 upon s plus a. So it will be 1 by a, 1 by s minus 1 by s plus a. So it will be 1 by a, 1 minus e raised power minus at ut. Now this is bounded. Here bounded input is producing bounded output. So if you see, this sort of a system can produce bounded input, bounded output, as well as unbounded output. But that depends on the input. Such a system is termed as marginally stable, which can produce both bounded as well as unbounded output depending upon the value of input. So unbounded output is produced only if the poles of RT or RS coincide with the poles of Fs or the transfer function. If the poles of input coincide with the poles of transfer function, then the response will be unbounded. And which poles specifically? The poles that lie on the imaginary axis. If the imaginary poles of the system coincide with the imaginary poles of input, then the response will be unbounded. If such a thing does not happen, then the response will be bounded. So that is called as marginal stability. Okay, though in signal system we define only stable and unstable, here we define third stability called as marginal stability. Now let us see, if I take two poles on origin, here transfer function would be 1 by s square, impulse response would be ramp function, that is t into ut. Such a system is unstable. Okay, so that means if more than one pole is lying on the imaginary axis, system would be unstable. So poles of order 1 are only permissible on the imaginary axis. Here pole of order 2 will lead to an unstable system. Now let us see if we take complex conjugate poles. So the transfer function would be s square plus a square. This is ja minus ja. So the response will be sine, it will be sine of at. So this is also marginally stable. Okay, why is it marginally stable? Only pole of order 1 is lying on the imaginary axis. No pole is repeated on the imaginary axis, so it is marginally stable. Okay, now let us see what will happen if we take pole of order 2 on imaginary axis, that is ja minus ja. So the response or the transfer function is this. So the response would be t sine t. So this is unstable. So that is what I am saying. If pole of order more than 1 exists on the imaginary axis, system would be unstable. Now what if the poles enter the right half plane? That is, suppose here the response or the transfer function is 1 upon s minus a. The response would be e raised power at. So it is unstable. So as soon as pole enters the right half plane, system is unstable. Now suppose we take complex conjugate poles on the right half plane, that is 1 upon s minus a square plus b square. The impulse response would be oscillatory, but the oscillations will be in increasing amplitude. So this will also be unstable. So whenever poles are lying in the right half plane, though there are real poles or imaginary poles, system would always be unstable. If poles are lying on the imaginary axis of order 1, then it is marginally stable. Of order more than 1, then it is unstable. If poles are lying in the left half plane, system is always stable or absolutely stable. Now let us see how we can identify the stability from the transfer function if we cannot calculate the poles. Then first of all, in a closed loop transfer function, we will form a characteristic equation. Now characteristic equation is basically denominator is equal to 0, that is 1 plus gh is equal to 0. This equation or the roots of this equation are the poles of closed loop transfer function. Okay, poles of closed loop transfer function are the roots of this equation or roots of characteristic equation. So first is the necessary condition for stability. First thing that you must check to check whether a system is stable or unstable is positiveness of all the coefficient, or that all the coefficients should have same sign. All coefficient should have same sign. That is, suppose I give you a characteristic equation. So here all coefficients are positive, system is at least not unstable. Okay, that means now I have to check some other condition to check the stability, but this system can be classified as not unstable. But if you see, if I change this sign to minus, so one coefficient is negative, so this system is not stable. Okay, if any of the coefficient is negative, then the system will not be stable. Other thing is that all coefficient must be present. That is, none of the coefficient must be 0. Okay, none of the coefficients should be equal to 0. That is, if I remove this, I simply say plus 2s equal to 0. So here if you see, s square is missing and s raised to power 0 is missing. So this system is not stable. Okay, so all the coefficients must be present, and that too they must have the same sign. So this is the necessary condition for stability. It is not the sufficient condition. That is, this is the first thing that must be checked. If this criteria is not satisfied, system can never be stable. If this criteria is violated, system will always be unstable, or it will never be stable. So that is what you need to check first of all. Now this condition, positiveness, is necessary and sufficient. Earlier I was just telling that it is not sufficient, it is only necessary, but it is necessary and sufficient for first and second order system. Okay, because first order system would have something like this characteristic equation. So poles will be minus a naught by a1, which is in LHP, provided a naught and a1 are greater than 0. So system is stable. If coefficients are positive, system is stable. Similarly, in second order system, a2s square plus a1s plus a naught, poles will be minus a1 plus minus under root a1 square minus 4 a2 a naught by 2. If all coefficients are positive, this is less than 0 or it lies in left half plane. So system is stable. That means for first and second order system, positiveness of coefficient is sufficient and necessary condition for the stability. Okay, that means you do not need to apply any criteria. If you see a first or a second order system, you can directly check whether it is stable or unstable. Okay, but what happens for a third order system? Suppose we take a third order system. Then let us take a characteristic equation of a third order system. It will be like s cube plus s square plus 2s plus 8. So if you check the roots using the calculator, the roots would come something like this: s plus 2, s minus 0.5 plus j root 15 by 2, s minus 0.5 minus j root 15 by 2. If you see, this pole lies in LHP, but these two poles lie in RHP. So positiveness of the coefficient guarantees that real pole will lie in left half plane. Okay, so positiveness only guarantees that real poles will be in left half plane, but complex poles can lie in right half plane. So that is why we need an additional criteria to judge the stability of a system of third order or higher. Okay, that we'll see in the next lecture. Okay, so what have we seen in this lecture is, we saw how does pole location affect response or affect the stability. We saw the criteria for stability, that is Bibo criteria, and we saw necessary condition for stability, that is all coefficient must be positive. In the next lecture, we will introduce to a necessary and sufficient criteria for checking the stability of a system, that is Routh criteria. That we'll see it is a necessary as well as sufficient condition for stability, but this must be applied for a system of order 3 or higher, because for order 2 you can directly check positiveness of the coefficient to determine stability. Hello guys, in the last lecture we started with the stability analysis of control systems. There we observed how the response varies or how the stability varies with the pole location. Okay, how stability is dependent on pole location. So I told you, whenever poles are lying in the left half plane, it is stable system. When they are lying on imaginary axis, it is marginally stable, and when they lie in the right half plane, system is unstable. But now the problem with this approach is, if we are given a higher order system, let us say the system of 8th order or 9th order, then we may not be able to find the poles of such a system. Okay, so then how do we identify whether the system is stable or unstable? And if it is unstable, then how much unstable it is, that is, how many number of roots are lying in the right half plane. So basic information about the roots of the characteristic equation, how we can find out without actually solving the characteristic equation, that is the problem. Then we saw the necessary condition is positiveness of coefficient. If coefficients are not positive, then system can never be stable. But one thing is, if the coefficients are positive, can I guarantee that the system is stable? No, because positiveness of coefficient is only a necessary condition but not a sufficient condition, which means even if all the coefficients are positive, it is not guaranteed that the system would be stable. So this is only necessary and sufficient for first and second order systems. Okay, but necessary only for third or higher order systems. So we need a criteria that can serve as a necessary as well as sufficient condition for determination of stability. Okay, so that is called as Routh-Hurwitz method. So this I'll explain through an example. Suppose we take characteristic equation something like this: s4 plus 8 s cube plus 18 s square plus 16 s plus 5 equal to 0. Now here we tend to form a Routh array. How we form it? Take the highest power of s and write down all even coefficient, because highest power of s is even. So write down all even power coefficient, that is 1, then 18, then 5. 5 is s raised to power 0, 0 is also even. Then take odd power, that is s cube, write down all odd power, 8, then 16. Now what to do is multiply this 8 into 18 minus 16 divided by 8. 8 into 18 minus 16 into 1 by 8. Then similarly 8 into 5 minus 1 into 0 by 8. So this will be 16. This here will come out to be 16. So s square will be 16 and 5. Then do the same thing for next, that is 16 into 16 minus 8 into 5 by 16. 16 into 16 minus 8 into 5 by 16. Always divide by this element. So it will be 16 minus 2.5, that is 13.5. Then s raised to power 0 will simply be 5. Now if you see, just observe the elements in the first column, that is 1, 8, 16, 13.5 and 5. Now if you see, the elements of the first column have the same sign. So in Routh method, number of sign change is equal to right half poles. Number of poles in right half plane is equal to number of sign change. So here there is no sign change, that means right half poles will be 0 and total poles are 4. So left half poles will be 4, right half poles will be 0. So this system is stable. Since there is no pole in the RHP, this system would be stable. So just here you need to multiply and take the difference and then take the division. Let me show by another example. Suppose we take another system, 3s4 plus 10 s cube plus 5 s square plus 5s plus 2. Okay, that means if we form the Routh array s raised to power 4, the coefficient will be 3, 5 and 2. Then s raised to power 3, it will be 10 and 5. Now if you see some row like this where you can take something common, then take it. That is, s cube can be written as 2, 1. We have divided the entire row by 5. Now if we wish to form s square, it will be 2 into 5 minus 3 into 1, that is 10 minus 3, 7 by 2. We have to divide by this factor. Then 2 into 2 minus 3 into 0 by 2, that is 2. Similarly, as 7.7 by 2, that is 3.5 into 1 minus 4, that is minus 0.5. So it will be minus 0.5 by 3.5, and s raised to power 0 would be 2. Okay. So now if you see here, the first row is like this: 3, 10, then 3.5, then minus 1 by 7, then 2. So there are two sign change, plus to minus, then minus to plus. So there are two sign change. So right half poles will be equal to 2 and left half poles will be equal to, total poles are 4. Order 4 means 4 poles. 4 minus 2 is equal to 2. So this system is unstable with two poles lying in the right half plane. So basically Routh-Hurwitz method tells us about the number of poles or number of roots lying in the right half or left half plane, but not about the location of the roots. So we only get to know how many roots are lying, so we will be able to judge whether the system is stable or unstable. Okay, so I hope that you got the process, what we need to multiply and divide. Otherwise we will be solving a lot more problems, then you will be able to catch up. Now if you see here, we are always dividing by the element of the first column. Whenever I am taking the division, like here I divided by 2, here I divide by 3.5. So we are always dividing by the element of the first column. That means if we are trying to take the division, none of the elements in the first column must be 0, because division by 0 is impossible. So let us see special cases where the first element may be reduced to 0. So first case is when one element or first element in a row is 0. Whenever the first element in a row is 0, but it must have at least one non-zero element. Okay, that means the entire row is not 0, it has at least one non-zero element. Okay, that means only the first element or one or two elements are 0, but not the entire row. Then what do we do is, we replace 0 by epsilon, where epsilon tends to 0 plus. It is not 0 exactly, but it is something greater than 0 but tending to 0. Okay, like 0.000001, like we can say it is 10 raised to power minus 6, 10 raised to power minus 7, like that. Something which is greater than 0 but still approximately 0. And then we will form the rest of the Routh array and check for sign changes. Okay, again we will check for sign changes by forming the rest of Routh array. Let us see what we can do by an example. Suppose I give you a characteristic equation like this: s cube plus 2s square plus s plus 2 is equal to 0. So we will first form Routh array, s cube 1, then another odd power, that is 1. S square is 2, 2. Then if we wish to find s raised to power 1, it will be 2 into 2, 1 minus 2 into 1, that is equal to 0. Okay, now this element is reduced to 0. What we will do is, we will replace it by epsilon. Then if we calculate s0, it will be 2 into epsilon minus 2 into 0 by epsilon. which is equal to 2. Now if we see first column, it is 1, 2, epsilon 2. Now we know epsilon is greater than 0. So all terms are positive. Okay. That means no sign change. That means right half poles will be equal to 0 and left half poles will be equal to 3 minus 0, that is 3. Because order of the equation is 3, that means 3 poles. So total number of poles are 3, out of which 0 poles are lying in the right half plane. That means total number of poles in the left half plane is 3. Okay. Next, let us see, here we avoided the case where the entire row may go to 0. So next case would be if entire row is reduced to 0. Okay. Then what do we do is we construct an auxiliary equation here. Auxiliary equation is basically the row above the row which is reduced to 0. Suppose if my s square row goes to 0 or s raised to power 1 row goes to 0, then the s square row would serve as an auxiliary equation. So we form auxiliary equation, that is row preceding row of zeros. Whichever row is preceding row of zeros, that will be auxiliary equation. And then we will replace row of zeros by derivative of auxiliary equation. We will take derivative of auxiliary equation and we replace the row which is reduced to 0. Okay. And auxiliary equation indicates presence of roots on imaginary axis. Till now we were taking only by Raoult's criteria also roots in the right half and left half plane. But here if auxiliary equation is formed, it indicates that imaginary roots are present. So if we can solve the auxiliary equation, we can find out the location of poles on imaginary axis. Okay, just by solution of the auxiliary equation. Let us see by an example. Suppose if we take an example like this, S6 plus 2S5 plus 8S4 plus 12S cube plus 20S square plus 16S plus 16 is equal to 0. S6 would be 1, then another even power 8, then even power is 20, then this 16. S5 would be 2, then 12, then 16. Okay, so we can divide by the entire row by 2. It will be 1, 6, 8. Now if we find S4 would be 1 into 8 minus 6, that is 2. Next 1 into 20 minus 8, that would be 12. S cube would be 2 into 6, 12 minus 12, that is 0. And it would 16 will also be there, that is 1 into 16 minus 1 into 0. So 0, 2 into 16 minus 16, that will also be 0. So this is the row of zeros. So here we will form auxiliary equation, that is from the row preceding this row. So that is s raised to power 4 will serve an auxiliary equation. It will be 2s4 plus 12s square plus 16 is equal to 0. Because this is the coefficient of s4, so this should be the coefficient of next even power of s, that is s square. This should be the coefficient of next even power, that is s. Now take derivative. It would be 8s cube plus 24s. Now what to do is replace this row of zeros by this 8 and 24. So it will be 8 and 24. Then s square would be 12 8 is 96 minus 48, that is 48, 6, then 16. Then 144 minus 128, that is 16. by 6, that is 8 by 3, and s raised to power 0 will be 16. Now if you see, first row has all the positive terms. The first row has first column has 1, then 2, then 8, then 6, then 8 by 3, then 16. That means no sign change. That means right half poles is equal to 0. There will be no pole lying in the right half plane. Okay. So that means that poles can lie in the left half plane, or the poles can lie in the imaginary axis. So that we will see how we can find out how many poles are lying on the imaginary axis without actually solving the auxiliary equation. Here if I don't want to solve this equation, how can I identify how many poles are lying on the imaginary axis? That we will see. Okay. So first of all, let us understand a bit more about the auxiliary equation. So first thing is that its roots are symmetrical about imaginary axis. Okay. First of all, the auxiliary equation always will be found with an even order, that is s raised to power 4, s raised to power 2, s raised to power 6, such sort of orders. So if you replace s by minus s, the equation remains the same. So its roots will always be symmetrical about the imaginary axis. That is, replacing s by minus s or taking negative of s will not affect the roots. They will always be same. Okay. That means about imaginary axis means if a pole is lying here 2, another pole will be here minus 2. Okay. Poles will be symmetrical about the y axis. Next is the number of sign change below auxiliary equation. Okay, number of sign change below auxiliary equation is equal to number of symmetrical poles. Suppose if 2 sign changes are there below the auxiliary equation, that means there are 2 symmetrical poles, 2 in the right half plane and 2 in the left half plane. That means how many imaginary poles are there? Imaginary poles are order of auxiliary equation minus right half poles minus left half poles. And I know right half and left half is equal to number of sign changes below AE, order minus 2 into number of sign change below auxiliary equation. That will be my number of imaginary poles. But these are only the symmetrically located poles in right half and left half plane. Total number of poles in right half plane will be same as the total number of sign changes. It will not matter how many sign changes are below auxiliary equation. Total number of sign changes will define total number of right half poles. Okay, that you must remember. So first of all, what you need to remember is auxiliary equation always has an even order. Its poles are always symmetrically located. Then if you count the number of sign changes below the auxiliary equation, you will get to know number of poles which are symmetrically located in the right half and left half plane. That will be equal to number of sign changes below auxiliary equation. It will be equal to number of symmetrically located poles in the right half and left half plane. Then rest of the poles will be lying on the imaginary axis. Suppose if the equation has order 6, let me say the auxiliary equation has order 6 and there are 2 sign changes below auxiliary equation. That means 2 poles are lying in the right half plane which are symmetrical to 2 poles in the left half plane. So that is 4 poles. But the order was 6. That means rest of the 2 poles are lying on the imaginary axis. But total number of poles in the right half plane is equal to total number of sign changes. Whether or not there is auxiliary equation, total number of right half poles is total number of sign changes. So from here we can identify imaginary number of poles. RHP is equal to total sign change. So if we get RHP and imaginary poles, we can find the left half poles. Left half poles will be equal to order of characteristic equation minus imaginary minus right half poles. So let me show you this by an example. Suppose if we have been given a polynomial like this, s4 plus s cube minus 3s square minus s plus 2 equal to 0. Then if we form Raut array, s4 will have coefficient 1, then minus 3, then 2. S cube will have 1 and minus 1. That means s square would be 1 into minus 3, that is minus 3, plus 1, that is minus 2. Then it will be 1 into 2, that is 2. Then s raised to power 1 would be 2 minus 2, that is 0. So this row is reduced to 0. So auxiliary equation would be minus 2s square plus 2 is equal to 0. Then if we take the derivative, it will be minus 4s. So we will replace s raised to power 1 by minus 4. Then s raised to power 0 would be minus 4 into 2, minus 2 into 0, by 4 minus 4, that is equal to 2. So now this is my auxiliary equation. So if you see below auxiliary equation, there are one sign change, that is from minus 4 to 2. There is one sign change. If this is one sign change, that means there is one right half pole which is symmetrical to one left half poles. So these will be two poles. Now auxiliary equation has an order of 2, and it is two poles, one in the left half, one in the right half. That means imaginary would be equal to 0, because it will be order of auxiliary minus 2 into number of sign changes. There is one sign change, that is order is 2, minus 2 into number of sign change, that is 2, that is 0. So there will be no pole on the imaginary axis. Now count total number of sign change. Total number of sign change, that is one sign change from 1 to minus 2, and minus 4 to 2 there is other sign change. That means there are two right half poles. Okay, imaginary is 0. So left half is 4 minus 2 minus 0, that is 2. Okay, so there will be two left half poles. Or if we write down a bit more clearly, so first thing is that auxiliary equation has an order 2. Okay, there is one right half pole and one left half pole based on sign change. That means imaginary poles is equal to 0. Order minus 2 into number of sign change. Now total number of sign changes are 2. That means RHP is equal to 2. LHP is equal to order of characteristic equation, that is 4, minus right half minus imaginary, that is 2. So there are two poles in right half, two in the left half, but one pole from the left half plane is symmetrical to one pole in the right half plane. Two poles are symmetrical about the y axis. Those two poles belong to the auxiliary equation. Let us take another example. Suppose the polynomial that is given is s6 plus 2s4 minus s square minus 2 is equal to 0. So if we form Raut array, s6 would be 1, then 2, then minus 1, minus 2. S raised to power 5 is 0, 0, 0. So this would be my auxiliary equation. So its derivative would be, auxiliary equation is basically s6 plus 2s4 minus s square minus 2 is equal to 0. So its derivative would be 6s5 plus 8s cube minus 2s. Okay, that means we will replace these coefficients by derivatives, that is 6, 8 minus 2. Okay, now we will calculate another row, s raised to power 4, that is 12 minus 8. 12 minus 8 is 4. 4 by 6 is 2 by 3. Next is minus 6 minus 2, minus 6 plus 2, that is minus 4. Minus 4 by 6 is minus 2 by 3. Okay, then 6 into minus 2, it will be minus 2. S cube would be, better if we take 2 by 3 common to simplify this, S4 can be written as 1 minus 1, and we have taken 2 by 3 common, so it will be minus 3. So if we calculate S cube would be 8 minus 6, that is 14, then minus 2 plus 18, that is 16. Then S square would be minus 14 minus 16, that is minus 30 by minus 14, minus 30 by 14, that is minus 15 by 7, then it will be minus 3. S raised to power 1 would be minus 15 by 7 into 16, that is minus 180 by 7, then plus 42. It will become 42 into 7, that is how much it will be? 294 minus 180 is 114 by 7. Now we have to divide by minus 15 by 7. So it will be how much? 3533938. So it will be S raised to power 1 will be minus 38 by 5, and S raised to power 0 will be minus 3. So if we see first column, then the first column has the elements 1, 6, then 2 by 3 we took common, so it will be 1, 6, 1, then 14, then minus 15 by 7, then minus 38 by 5, then minus 3. So if you see here, below auxiliary equation there is one sign change, because this was auxiliary equation. So it implies one left half pole which is symmetrical to one right half pole. But total poles of the auxiliary equation must be 6. So imaginary poles will be 6 minus 1 minus 1, that is 4. So there are 4 imaginary poles, one pole in the left half, one pole in the right half. So that is how we identify the total number of poles in a system, which are lying in the left half plane, which are lying in the right half plane. Okay, that is the procedure for solving the Routh array with the auxiliary equation. Now let us come to another term, which is relative stability. Till now we are talking about whether a system is stable, unstable, or marginally stable. But what if I give you two systems which are stable, but I want to know which of them is more stable than the other one? That is termed as relative stability. So what happens is, if there are two poles, let us say one is at minus a1, one is at minus a2. I know pole is equal to 1 upon time constant minus 1 upon tau 2 minus 1 upon tau 1. Now I know a2 is greater than a1, that means tau 2 is less than tau 1. That means transient of second system will die faster than the first system. That is why in the last topic we defined it as dominant pole, because transient does not die soon. But here, since transient dies soon, this would be called as more stable, because transient behavior dies soon and the system settles down. So it is more stable. It has less chances that the output would vary in certain range. So that means farther away from origin is more stable. Okay. Greater the distance from the origin, higher is the stability of the system. Okay. So how do we identify relative stability when we talk about the Routh criteria? That we need to see how we can find out relative stability using Routh criteria. So what do we do is, basically, if we want to judge the relative stability, let us say this is my origin. So better shift this axis to somewhere here. If we can shift this axis to somewhere here, this A1 pole will lie in the right half plane. That means this system would be judged as unstable. But this A2 pole is still lying in the left half plane. That means this would still be stable. So what do we do in Routh criteria is, we will shift the axis and then we will judge whether one system becomes unstable and other remains as stable. If such a case happens, then it means that the system which has become unstable was less stable. So we need to shift the axis. But since we are not sure about the pole location, it would take a lot of hit and trial methodology to judge up to where we need to shift the axis. That is why it takes a lot of effort in Routh criteria to determine the relative stability, because we will continuously need to shift the axis and judge the stability of the two systems to compare which is more stable. And that is for only two systems. If I want to compare 10 systems, then it would be a bit more complicated also. So let us see how we can do this, how we can shift the axis. Suppose if we take a characteristic equation s cube plus 7s square plus 25s plus 39 is equal to 0. Okay. Now we need to judge how many roots are lying below s is equal to minus 1. That is how many roots are lying to the left of this line. So we need to shift the axis from s is equal to 0 to s is equal to minus 1. That's why I defined s is equal to z minus 1. That means whenever z is equal to 0, s is equal to minus 1. So we can apply the Routh criteria in terms of z is equal to 0 or z, because Routh criteria is applied about the imaginary axis or when real part of the axis is 0. So if we apply Routh criteria about z is equal to 0, we are indirectly applying about s is equal to minus 1. So the poles that lie to the left of z is equal to 0 will lie to the left of s is equal to minus 1. Poles that lie to the right of z is equal to 0 will lie to the right of s is equal to minus 1. So if we substitute here z minus 1 cube plus 7, z minus 1 square plus 25, z minus 1 plus 39. So this would give me z cube plus 4z square plus 14z plus 20 is equal to 0. So if we write down the rows 1, 14, then 4, 20, it will be 56 minus 20, that is 36, so 9, and z raised to power 0 would be 20. Now all the coefficients are positive, that means all poles lie to left of z is equal to 0 or s is equal to minus 1. That means all the three poles here will lie to the left of s is equal to minus 1. That is how we perform the relative stability analysis. We will shift the axis to the line where we want to judge the location of poles to the right and the left, and then we will apply Routh criteria based on the new variable. Like here I am applying Routh criteria in terms of z instead of s. So what can be a shortcut, because this was only a third order equation. If we are given a 8th order or 9th order equation and we were to judge about s is equal to minus 1, then substitute this point in this equation. S cube plus 7s square plus 25s plus 39. Substitute here minus 1 cube plus 7 into minus 1 square plus 25 into minus 1 plus 39. It will be minus 1 plus 7 minus 25 plus 39. So it will be 46 minus 26, that is 20, which is greater than 0. So all poles lie to the left. Okay. If it were to be lesser than 0, that means poles will lie to the right of this line also. Then we will apply that criteria to know how many poles are lying to the right of this line. But as long as this is greater than 0, all poles will be lying to the left of this line. So this trick you can apply for a complicated system or a system of very high order. Okay. Next, let us see how we can apply this Routh criteria to linear feedback system. Now suppose I give you a unity feedback system with GS is equal to K upon S, S square plus S plus 1, S plus 4. Now I want to know the range of K for which this system is stable, because characteristic equation would be 1 plus GS is equal to 0. It is a unity feedback system, so HS is 1. So it will be S into S square plus S plus 1, S plus 4 plus K is equal to 0. That means S4 plus 5S cube plus 5S square plus 4S plus K is equal to 0. Now the roots will be dependent on K. So I want to know what should be the value of K for this system to be stable. So let us form a Routh array in terms of this. So first let me rub this entire thing and we will form a Routh array. The equation is S4 plus 5s cube plus 5s square plus 4s plus k is equal to 0. So it will be S4, that is 1, 5, k. S cube will be 5 and 4. Now it will be 25 minus 4, that is 21 by 5, and it will be k. Now s raised to power 1 will be 84 by 5 minus 5k divided by 21 by 5. S raised to power 0 would be k. Now I know for stability all the coefficients of the first column must be positive. That means if s raised to power 0 coefficient we see, k must be greater than 0, and also 84 by 5 minus 5k must be greater than 0. That is k must be less than 84 by 25. So k must lie between 0 to 84 by 25 for system to be stable. In the last chapter, one thing I told you, if we increase the value of system gain, error coefficients increase and the system error or the accuracy increases, error decreases. But here if you see, if you go beyond 84 by 25, then the system would become unstable. So increasing the gain has two effects on the system. It does decrease the error of the system, but it can lead to unstable system or instability in the system. So it is a two-edged sword. If you increase the gain, you get a benefit of reduced error, but you also get a disadvantage that the system may become unstable. Now what happens? Suppose if I keep k is equal to 84 by 25. That is, if I keep k is equal to k max equal to 84 by 25, then s raised to power 1 coefficient goes to 0. Then my auxiliary equation would be equal to this row, because s raised to power 1 row is 0, so auxiliary equation will be this. Okay, it is s square 21 by 5 s square plus k equal to 0. So now if I substitute k here, that is 84 by 25, it would be 0. So s would be equal to plus minus j 2 by root 5. Okay, this is the location of imaginary poles, and we know whenever the poles are lying on the imaginary axis, system is undamped. Okay, system would be undamped, and these poles correspond to j omega n and minus j omega n. If you remember the time response analysis, the poles that lie on the imaginary axis correspond to the natural frequency. So here natural frequency of oscillation is 2 by root 5 radian per second. So this way question can also be asked to find the natural frequency of oscillation. In that case, you need to equate the coefficient of s raised to power 1 equal to 0. Okay. But what are the limitations of the Routh criteria? When we are applying the Routh criteria, what are the limitations? That is, first, all coefficients must be real. Okay. They cannot be function of s like sinusoidal, exponential or any other function. They must be real. Whether they are positive or negative does not matter, but they must be real. Okay. Secondly, it does not tell location of poles. It only tells how many poles are there, but never the location of poles. Okay. So that is the two limitations that we get with the Routh criteria. That is, we cannot identify the location of poles, and the characteristic equation must be such that all coefficients must be real. So what have we learnt in this lecture is, we saw what is Routh criteria. Okay. Then we saw special cases. First element is 0, where we applied epsilon, which is tending to 0 plus. And next we saw about the auxiliary equation. There we saw how we can identify right half poles, imaginary poles and left half poles. And next we saw relative stability. Other than that, we saw the range of k for stability and omega n, also natural frequency of oscillation. So in the next lecture we will be solving a few problems that Hi guys, in the last lecture we covered Routh criteria. We saw that Routh criteria can be applied to find out the number of poles that lie in the left half, right half and the imaginary axis of the S-plane. And we saw Routh criteria can also be used to identify the range of K for which the system is stable. As well as we looked at the concept of relative stability using the Routh criteria, that is how we can identify whether if two systems are stable, which of them is more stable. So in this lecture what we are gonna do is we will be solving some problems based on Routh criteria, because such problems are very common in GATE examination and the problems that we'll be dealing here have already appeared in GATE exam. So let us move on to our first problem. Here we have been given a polynomial, a characteristic equation. We need to find the number of roots in the left half plane. So let us form the Routh array. S cube, we will take odd powers 1 and S 7. S square, take even powers 5 and 3. S raised to power 1, 35 minus 3, that is 32 by 5. Then S raised to power 0 will be 3. Now if you observe first column, all coefficients are positive, that is right half poles is equal to 0, left half poles will be 3 minus 0, that is 3. So 3 poles of the characteristic equation or 3 roots of the characteristic equation lie in the left half S plane. Okay. Moving on to the next problem. Here we have been given a system that is described by this transfer function and it is stable. We need to find the constraints on alpha and k. So characteristic equation is s cube plus alpha s square plus ks plus 3 equal to 0. S cube is 1, k, s square is alpha 3. S raised to power 1 is alpha k minus 3 by alpha s raised to power 0 is k. Now for stability, all coefficients in first column must be greater than 0. It implies alpha is greater than 0. Next condition is alpha k minus 3 should be greater than 0, that is alpha k must be greater than 3. So these are the constraints that apply on alpha and k. Okay, these two constraints apply on alpha and k. So that is how if you keep the value of alpha k greater than 3, the system would always be stable. Next we have been given a signal flow graph and we have to find the condition for stability. Before finding condition of stability, we have to find the transfer function. So if you see, there is only one forward path. The gain of forward path is k by s. Okay, the loops are 3 by s and loop 2 is minus k by s. Now if you see, this forward path touches all the loops, that means delta 1 would be equal to 1. Delta would be equal to 1 minus sum of loop gains 3 by s minus k by s. It is equal to 1 s plus k minus 3 upon s. So gain would be k by s over s plus k minus 3 by s. That means my transfer function would come out to be k upon s plus k minus 3. Now for this system to be stable, poles must be in left half plane. K minus 3 must be greater than 0. That means k must be greater than 3. Or otherwise, in other words, you can say that all coefficients must be positive. I told you positiveness of the coefficient is a necessary as well as sufficient condition for first and second order system. Here it is an example of first order system, that means this coefficient must be positive. So k must be greater than 3. Next is the positive values of k and a, so that the system shown in the figure below oscillates at a frequency of 2 radian per second. We have to find the values of a and k. Let us first write down characteristic equation. It is basically 1 plus gs equal to 0. So it will be 1 plus k s plus 1 upon s cube plus alpha s square plus 2s plus 1. This will be as square equal to 0. So it will be s cube plus as square plus k plus 2s plus k plus 1 equal to 0. Okay. So let me write down the equation again. S cube plus as square plus k plus 2s plus k plus 1 equal to 0. Now let us form the Raoult array. S cube 1, k plus 2, s square is a, k plus 1, s raised power 1 is a k plus 2 minus k plus 1 by a, s raised power 0 is k plus 1. Now we know for oscillations coefficient of s raised to power 1 should be 0. That means a into k plus 2 should be equal to k plus 1. If this coefficient is reduced to 0, auxiliary equation becomes as square plus k plus 1 should be equal to 0. Okay. Now substitute the value of k plus 1 here. It will be as square plus a k plus 2 equal to 0. So it will be s square plus k plus 2 equal to 0. Now the oscillation frequency is given to us as 2 radian per second. Finding oscillation frequency from here, that will be the roots of the auxiliary equation. S is equal to plus minus j under root k plus 2. This should be equal to plus minus j 2 because oscillation frequency is 2 radian per second. Root k plus 2 is equal to 2 or k is equal to 2. Okay, under root 4 will be equal to 2. Next we know one more condition, that a into k plus 2 equal to k plus 1. That means a into 4 equal to 3, or a is equal to 0.75, that is 3 by 4. So here k must be equal to 2 and a is greater than 0.75. So even it was told earlier that values of a and k should be greater than 0, and our final result agrees with the statement given in the equation. Both the values are greater than 0. Okay. If one value would have been coming lesser than 0, then it would have been in conflict with the statement and our answers would be incorrect. Okay. Next is we have to find the number of right half open loop poles. So let us first write down Raoult array. Since it is asking open loop poles, we do not need to convert it into characteristic equation. We have to directly take it as a characteristic equation. So 1, 3, then 5, s raised to power 4 would be 2, 6, 3. Then s raised to power 3 would be 2 into 3 minus 6, that is 0. 2 into 5 minus 3, that is 7 by 2. Now this coefficient is reduced to 0. So this is one of the special case that we studied. We will replace it by epsilon, where epsilon is greater than 0. Okay. Next we have to calculate the coefficient of s square. So let us write down the Raoult array again. S5 is 1, 3, 5. S raised to power 4 is 2, 6, 3. Then s cube was epsilon and 3.5. S square would be 6 epsilon minus 7 by epsilon. Okay. S raised to power 1 would be 3.5 minus, this is equal to, the other term in s square would be 3 directly. Epsilon into 3 minus 2 by epsilon. Next would be 3 epsilon divided by this way, and s raised to the power 0 would be 3. Now checking the sign. If you write down first row, 1, 2, epsilon, 6 epsilon minus 7 by epsilon, this would be 3.5 minus 3 epsilon square over 6 epsilon minus 7, 3. This is greater than 0. This is greater than 0, greater than 0, greater than 0. But here, this epsilon is approximately 0. Let us say 0.01. Then this value would be less than 0. Okay. This value 3.5 minus, if any value considers epsilon, this value will always be greater than 0. So here we have two sign changes. Here to here, we are going from greater than 0 to lesser than 0. Again from lesser than 0 to greater than 0. So two sign change. It implies we have two right half plane poles. Okay. Two poles of the characteristic equation will lie in right half plane. Is it fine? So whichever equation you consider, whenever you consider epsilon, consider it tending to 0. Even you can consider it as 0.001, 0.01 like that. Okay. That will give you a clear picture of the sign of the coefficients of the first column. Moving on to the next question. Here we have been given a characteristic equation. So let us form Raoult array from this. S raised to power 5, 1, then 5, then 4. S raised to power 4 will be minus 3, minus 7, 20. S cube would be here minus 15 plus 7, that is minus 8. Minus 8 by minus 3 is 8 by 3. Minus 12 plus 20. Minus 12 minus 20, that is minus 32. And minus 32 by minus 3 is 32 by 3. Now if you see, these both are multiple of 8 by 3. Let me take that out common. So s cube can be written as 1, 4. I have taken out 8 and 8 by 3. So we will rewrite s cube as 1 and 4. S square minus 7. Then s square would be, it will be equal to minus 7. Then this would be plus 12, that is 5. Then it will be 20. Again we can take out 5 common, so it will be 1, 4. So let us rewrite this s square column. We have taken 5 common, so it will be 1, 4. Now if you see, s raised to power 1 would be 0, because 4 minus 4 it is 0. So here we will form auxiliary equation, which is s square plus 4, and its derivative would be 2s. So we will replace the s power 1 coefficient by 2 here. S raised to power 0 would be 4. So if you see, we have two sign changes here, positive to negative, negative to positive. It implies two right half plane poles, two sign changes. Now these roots of auxiliary equation are s is equal to plus minus 2j. So two poles are on imaginary axis. After that, since the order is 5, so left half poles will be 5 minus 2 minus 2, that is 1. So one pole is lying in the left half S plane. Is it fine? So that is how we can identify the roots lying in the left half, right half, or complex or imaginary axis. Otherwise, one thing also I told you about the sign changes below auxiliary equation. Okay. So here if you see, this was my auxiliary equation. Sign change below this auxiliary equation is 0. Okay. 0 sign change below AE. Then I told you imaginary poles is equal to order of AE, order of auxiliary equation is 2, minus 2 times number of sign change, that is 2. and right half is total number of sign change, that is 2. So similarly left half would be 5 minus 2, that is 5 minus 2 minus 2, that is 1. So this way also you can identify the number of imaginary poles by looking at the number of sign changes below auxiliary equation. Okay, that gives the number of symmetrically located poles in left and right half plane. Moving on to the next problem. Here we have been given a feedback system. We have to find the range of k for which system is stable. Okay, so if we form characteristic equation 1 plus k s plus 3 s plus 10 equal to 0, so it will be s cube plus 13s square plus 30s plus k equal to 0. Okay, this will be this. Next, if we take the form the Routh array from this, this will be 30s. Okay, if we form Routh array from this, s cube s square, coefficient of s cube would be 1, 30, then 13k, 1, 30, then 13k. Okay, s raised power 1 would be 390 minus k by 13, and s raised power 0 would be k. Now this will give me that 390 minus k should be greater than 0, that is k should be less than 390, and last condition would give me k is greater than 0. That means k lies between 0 and 390 for stability. If k goes beyond 390, system would be unstable. Moving on to the last problem. Here we have been given a system. We need to find the number of poles in right half S plane. So characteristic equation is S4 plus 6s cube minus 39s square plus 19s plus 84 equal to 0. So forming Routh array, 1 minus 39, 84, 6 and 19. S square coefficient would be, if you calculate, minus 253 by 6, and next would be 84. Now if we calculate s raised to power 1, it comes out to be 30.95, and s raised to power 0 coefficient would be 84. So if you see, there are two sign changes here between s cube and s square and s square to s1. Two sign change implies two right half poles. So two poles of this equation, or two roots of this equation, lie in the right half S plane. Okay, so only these kind of problems can be asked. One is the range of k for stability, other is the number of poles that lie in the left half, right half, or the imaginary axis. These are the questions that can be framed from Routh criteria. That is why the questions from Routh criteria are very limited, because not very innovative questions can be framed from this topic. But still you need to practice, because if such a question come in the examination, you have to take it as a scoring opportunity. Okay, in the next chapter we will see how we can predict the trajectories of the roots instead of just finding the number of roots in the left and right half plane.